On April 26, 1991, a colossal tornado chisels a 75-mile-long trail across 2 counties in Kansas. 20 people are killed, thousands more are injured and left homeless. Since we first presented this story on Eyewitness Video, police, fire departments, weather services, and schools across the nation have asked to use it for instruction and safety preparedness. We catch up with this killer tornado just as it slams into McConnell Air Force Base.
The siren went off, and my heart immediately started pumping, and I was about to go ahead and get into the shelter with my kids, and I heard a neighbor yelling something. About 80 yards away was a lady and a child, and they were running in my direction, and I was yelling, "Come on, come on," and they kind of froze. I saw why they stopped, and the first words out of my mouth was, "God, I don't want to die this way." I grabbed the daughter. We were running. We got to our neighbor's home, and the whole time, this tornado was still coming. We kept hitting the door. We were banging and yelling and screaming, and I was like, I don't think we're gonna make it. Finally, where the door was open, we rushed right in the house, got some cushions, threw them in the bathroom, and slammed the door. And I was praying, God, please let us be okay. Please, Lord, take care of my family. And it was just over within seconds. I mean, it was just like somebody had dropped a bomb. And I was like, my kids. So I ran back towards my house, and I could hear my daughter crying. I said, "Joanne, are you okay?" She said, "Yes, Dad." And Michael, my son, who's 4, was sitting there. He said, "Dad, the tornado came and tore up our house."
Let's go back to our KFDI mobile units.
This tornado is still doing a lot of damage. It is still drawing up lots of strength.
My job at the time was to be out front, to chase the tornado, to give locations, to tell listeners which way the storm is moving, how bad it is, what's going on. I was moving at about 85 miles per hour at the time, trying to keep up.
This storm is still doing a lot of damage and packing a lot of damaging wind. So folks in Andover, take cover immediately.
As I rode up on Andover, cresting a hill, there it was. It was almost a sight out of hell.
At the time I was on my second pregnancy, I looked out my door and there was this giant dark gray black wall with debris heading right towards me. I just grabbed my purse and just took off running. I felt I was losing ground, like somebody was just pulling me backwards. And then I kind of looked up to my left just to see what was going on. I couldn't believe it. The house was expanding outwards towards me. And that's about the last thing I remember.
In the area of Andover, I'm looking at it right now. It's really thick, very wide.
It was spewing up from the front, the sides. So in the final moments there, I decided that my truck was probably the best shield. The pickup became airborne, and I'm being sucked and rolled underneath. Well, at this point, the transmission of the truck is in my midsection. Man, I've never had pain like that. I was thinking there was going to be no telling how many people dead, no telling how many people on the verge of dying. We think that our toys and our houses and everything are of great value to us, but at this point, they mean nothing to you.
What's your name? Hi, Teresa. My name's Jeff.
It took them a minute or two just to unbury me to where they could find me. I guess was lucky in a way because the frame of the mobile home pinned me down to where I wasn't sucked up into the tornado.
Are you breathing all right, honey? Now listen, how bad you hurting right now?
I'm not sure how long I was in recovery before I was conscious to the point where they could come in and tell me that my son did not make it.
There are power lines down here in Andover. We have reports of injuries. We don't know how many or how severe.
It was almost like a giant graveyard. It was unbelievable. People had no homes. They had nowhere to go. It gave me a better appreciation for life, and I think a lot of people were affected that way.
We would encourage you also to stay off of K-15 because there is debris all over the roadway down here near. We've had quite a bit of damage in and around this area.
And so I didn't have the radio on, and picked my girls up, and we were getting back on the turnpike, and we could see a lot of debris floating around in the sky and some of it falling out.
All of a sudden, we saw this big white tornado coming towards us.
I started crying, and I said, Dad, we're gonna die. We are really, really gonna die.
To try and keep the girls from getting too nervous, I just said, girls, keep your eyes out for Dorothy.
And that made me laugh a little bit, but still I went back to crying.
Greg, Jarrett, and myself, we'd been working on the story for some time up north of Topeka, an hour out of Wichita. We started getting into some debris. This debris kept getting heavier. I mean, it started to turn into clothes and things, and neither of us had ever seen a tornado, so we didn't know. So I just pulled over the shoulder, got it up on a tripod, just kind of zoomed in.
Guys, let's get out of here. Throw us in the back.
I scuttled and jumped and kept my camera and deck with me.
Go, go, go. Shoot it. Better floor it. You better floor it. Shoot it. We're all right. Just stay ahead of it. Just floor us.
And so I pulled over to stop, and we watched it. We were just enraptured by it. It was something to see. And all of a sudden it hit one of the poles and just shattered it. I knew at that point it was coming directly toward us.
And so we flipped a U-turn and went back underneath the bridge.
And I could see this white car coming up behind us, and that was Greg and Ted.
Lots faster. Lots faster. Lots faster. Greg's catching us.
They were racing the tornado, and they were going to try and outrun it. And I didn't think they were going to make it past the tornado.
You got to go, buddy. You got to really go. You got to blaze, buddy.
So then we just gave it all we got to the overpass. There was two girls and their father, and they looked at us and we looked at them.
Greg shouted, "Get up under the bridge."
Get up under the girders. Is that where you want to go? Yes. Underneath the girders. Keep rolling, Ted.
At that point in time, I can remember everybody had crawled up under the shelf, and I was still kneeling down on the outside of this concrete shelf, and I kind of looked one last time, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's coming.
I'm thinking I'm gonna die. This is the end of the world.
We were in the eye of the tornado. It was that split second when I thought I was going to die.
Okay, talk to me. What happened? It sounded like a freight train. It just passed right on top of us. People very upset. People underneath the girders of this overpass. They're still hanging on for their lives. Yeah. A little frightening.
I mean, it was like 2 or 3 seconds, and then it just recessed, and then it moves on and like lines up its victims one after another and just goes right down the line.
And it's just amazing that we lived through it, and then so many people in Andover and in parts of Wichita didn't.
We'll be right back with August 24th, 1992. In the early morning hours, Hurricane Andrew slams into South Florida. More than 20 people are killed. Estimated damage, $20 billion. For most of us, it's impossible to imagine the magnitude of this storm. Yet somehow, there are people who manage to document its fury. Their videos give us a glimpse of what it was like living through a night of terror.
Well, it's August 23rd. This is what the sky looks like. Everybody's hauling their butt out of here, and I will be right in tow. Bye, pretty house. I loved you. I know you won't be here when I get back. I had made the decision that the warehouse where my brother's business was located would be much safer than the homes that we were staying in. And I tried to convince my brother to come with me. So I went over there with my video camera.
Hey, time for a hurricane party.
They were there barbecuing and saying they were having a hurricane party. And I said, look, I said, you're going to die. You're going to die if you stay in this house.
Huh? Think I'm going to pop out this baby during the hurricane?
Oh, God. His attitude was, well, I'm the captain of my ship. Our last meal. And the captain goes down with the ship, you know, making a joke out of it. Well, here's where we're staying to weather the storm. We've got all our supplies right here. So we got in the warehouse, me and my girlfriend, Kathy. We're gonna sleep in that truck. About 7:15, we got the first gust of the tropical storm that was the front prior to the hurricane. Hey, hold on to my pants if the wind gets me. I'm serious. And the gust was so severe that it almost knocked the trees over, and that was just a forewarning. You could start to hear the wind howling, and it just got louder and louder and louder and louder. Hey, if we ain't safe in here, we're not going to be safe, period. And you could see the door just being sucked in and out by the wind. It sounded like a poltergeist. So it was just like it just wanted to come in on us. It just got progressively worse until finally, as I was filming, the power went off. So now we're in complete darkness other than a flashlight that I have. So I said, let me go back out here and check the ceiling and the doors, because it sounds like they're going to give. Once that door gave, I said, run for the bathroom. And so I shoved my girlfriend into the bathroom first, and I jumped in there and we locked the door. All of a sudden, it was just like a freight train. It was the worst god-awful sound.
Oh, God, please.
The whole bathroom started shaking.
Oh, God, please.
The door was starting to come off the hinges.
Oh, my God, stop. Please, stop.
We spent 45 minutes buckling that door, and we were just pushing for dear life, and we wouldn't let go. It is the most frightening feeling. You can't imagine. You cannot imagine the feeling. Total devastation. And at that point, I just broke down in tears, believing that my brother and his wife were already dead, because if this warehouse didn't withstand this kind of pressure, how could those homes have?
What she experienced and what I experienced are just about the same thing. It's probably the scariest thing that anybody could ever go through. It's like a horror film that you probably watch on TV, but you're going through it yourself at that time. I know I was wrong by not going with her, but you know, we're still standing. That's the main thing.
Here are the effects of Andrew is
begins to arrive here on Miami Beach. You can see the palms blowing.
Kerry Sanders and I basically had free reign from the station to go out and try to find the first signs of the hurricane, the wind, the high seas, and this sort of thing.
You can see the sand. It's almost like a blizzard, a snowstorm of sand. The sand is like shooting like a sandblaster. It sounded like it was just taking the paint off the car. And this was early. The storm hadn't even hit yet. It was just blowing, and that sand was picking up and just hitting. And here you can see the wind is really picking up. In fact, the car is rocking back and forth, and I'm sure that's evident in the picture. The white flag blowing.
We took as much video as we possibly could on Miami Beach to give viewers the feel of what it is like to feel these winds and to let them know it's coming, okay? It is coming here now, and you need to prepare yourself.
Well, here you can see the water's just whipping up, the wind is whipping up, the surf is just coming right across the front of our car. We went down the street and opened up the window occasionally, and you could hear things tumbling by. And we're snaking our way very slowly, trying to get some shots. The wind's really picking up. I'm afraid that something may come flying by and come through the window and smack right into us. So we figured, okay, we better get out of that situation.
As we're driving along, the winds are clearly picking up. I mean, we're talking 120, 130 mile an hour winds. Tree branches are being blown all over, street signs are blowing all over. Kerry is driving at the time, and I'm trying to shoot video. Don't stop. Nothing's worth stopping for.
Maybe someone.
Careful! Come on, damn it! Watch what you're doing.
Steve is encouraging me to please keep my eyes open. I'm not a very good driver, and so I'm not doing the best job. And Steve's looking out not only to shoot the video, but he's looking out for my abilities to drive in a very, very hairy situation.
Careful! Are you really that bad at night vision? Apparently. It becomes evident that Kerry's having difficulty driving. He's a heck of a reporter in my eyes, but he's probably one of the lousiest drivers I've ever seen. Damn it, Kerry, you're gonna get us killed here. It became so much a concern of mine that I decided to drive the car. Stop! Just stop! Stop it! Right now! You are too going to! You see the power line? I handed him the video camera and I said, you just do whatever you want with the camera. And at that point, I'm trying to get us to safe harbor. Every time we would make a turn, there was something blocking our way, a down tree, a down line. We turn around, we take another turn again. Something was in our way, something was blocking our exit. We may be into something here or worse than what we thought.
We ran smack dab into a huge tree that had just crashed across the road, and we could not pass. So we figured, let's turn around and come back on the wrong side of the road. There's the tree that was blocking our entire passage on the other side. It's completely fallen across. Luckily, we're able to come over on this side to get across, and we're just going to go ahead and get around it. We're heading down, and you can feel the car being pushed down the road from these winds. The tree limbs are going by, the electrical lines are coming by, and finally an interstate sign or something comes flying by.
Holy! We gotta get out of here. We gotta get out. Okay. At this time, common sense says, okay, folks, this is enough. This is when you stop being a journalist and having to get that story out to people and saying, first thing I gotta do here is save my own life. Kerry suggests that we park under Metro Rail, which is an elevated platform of concrete and concrete pillars.
Right now I'm laying on the floor of the car. That's for the reason I'm sort of sideways here in the picture. I'm laying there underneath the glove box, basically explaining to the viewers what we're going through and what's happening at the moment that the hurricane is hitting almost with its full force.
The reason we stopped here is there is just too much debris flying down the road, signs flying down the road. There are wires all over the place, and so we're going to be riding the storm out where we are right now.
The sun is beginning to come up. We're beginning to get our first glimpses now of the damage all around us. Things are just gone. Buildings are gone, roofs are gone, signs are gone. We're not exactly sure where we are because some of the street signs are now missing. And we got out of the car and a family came out of their home and they were very frightened, and they came up to me and they said, "Is the storm over, or is this the eye?" And we gave them the news that the storm was over and they had survived it, and they were just thrilled to have survived it, as I guess we were.
Hopefully this house is going to stay together. I'm praying to God it does. Somewhere out there, that's where Andrew is.
When I got home from work, I picked up the video camera and decided to document it, just for the purpose of, for the family and friends, and to show the baby when the baby was born and old enough eventually.
We are right there, right in direct line of the eye.
Of course we were concerned because Tanya is 5 months pregnant.
It's just about 4 o'clock and we've officially lost power.
And she was very upset that I was doing the video. But in my mind, this was my way of trying to keep myself calm, and also to show her that I wasn't getting upset, that I was also calm, hoping it would keep her, in a stable state.
I wanted to kill him. I was telling him all the time, "Please, I'm scared, don't do it. Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Honey, don't worry, everything is gonna be fine. I'm doing this because the baby is gonna see what the hurricane is, in the future, how it looks like."
About 4:30, the winds really started howling and really started coming in. And you could actually see the blue flashing lights that are being caused by the transformers on the electrical poles exploding.
We're getting some real heavy gusts. Right now we're sustaining probably about 140 mile-an-hour winds. We're losing the tiles off the top of the roof. We are losing the tiles off the top of the roof.
You could actually hear them ripping off the roof and then tumbling down and crashing outside on the patio.
Time to get to the safe room.
And that's when I first realized that this was very serious.
Tell you what, folks, this is scary as hell.
When I started to see him scared, that's when I said, "Oh my God, my baby. I'm not gonna hug him. I'm not gonna be able to tell him how much we love him."
This is so scary.
This is scary.
At this point is when the eye wall had basically came upon us. The sounds and the things that we had heard was just incredible. The crashing and the wind sounds and everything was happening. We heard everything hitting the house and the inside of the house being torn apart. We thought that we'd be gone. We didn't think that we'd come through this. We both turned to each other and we actually said, whatever happens, I'll always love you, and we'll always be there for each other.
And we kissed each other and we said goodbye, because we thought that was the end of everything.
Hey, relax, baby. Everything's gonna be okay.
Probably around 6:30 in the morning, the crashing and all the sounds that we'd heard all through the evening had pretty much stopped.
We think that at this time in the morning, the worst part is gone. We're gonna be just fine. But we still haven't.
At that point, we could actually look up into the ceiling and see the light coming up, and we knew that it was definitely daylight, and it was a big relief.
Well, here we are. It's 7:50, almost 8 o'clock in the morning. Total devastation. We're all in shock. It hasn't hit us yet.
It was just incredible to see the house destroyed the way it was. The feeling is indescribable. It really is.
This was our living room.
When we went around the side of the house and we actually looked down what used to be our street, it was just an overwhelming feeling of destruction.
This is right down the block from the house.
The cars flipped over on top of each other that looked like they were just tossed like little toys.
Look at this one out.
It was just incredible to see the neighborhood in that condition. And we just said, how did we make it through this?
Some of the destruction caused by Mr. Andrew.
It's just unbelievable that in 1 hour and a half, something can make all that kind of destruction. And I tell you that 1 hour and a half, changed our lives forever.
There's our little sign to Andrew there.
Home videos like the one shot during Hurricane Andrew are extraordinary to watch. And as we tell you each week, we'd like to hear from you if you've been a video eyewitness to such an event. But we'd also like to add a word of caution and common sense. Having your video shown on television is not something for which you should risk your life. Your safety is much more important than a few seconds of videotape.
It just came right in at our cabin. It was the most scariest moment of my whole life.
July 5th, 1991. 3 families are sharing a vacation cabin on the shore of North Long Lake near Brainerd, Minnesota. Bob Goodry has his camcorder rolling when he notices that the skies have suddenly darkened. What Bob sees next through the viewfinder is at the same time fascinating and frightening.
This is North Long Lake, where we always come to relax and enjoy the water. But this is where also a tornado came last year. I had my home movie camera with me, and I filmed it coming across the lake from the west side here.
It's Bob. You got your first Gull Lake tornado going on over here. Check it out.
Eh?
Check it out.
Oh
See,
my
you get your cloud
gosh.
movement that way, and you get your cloud movement this way. Watch your little funnel clouds to spin out of that gray area.
Look at that funnels.
No, not that one.
Nah, 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 nah. Yeah, look at that tail. We were watching it over by the highway. At that point, we knew something was coming up, but it looked like it was gonna just go out on the lake.
Oh, look at the trees by the highway.
All right, look at there.
Look at the highway trees.
Oh,
Power line just went out.
power line just went out. Look at them. Power lines, I'm getting every power line out.
This is cool.
Oh, you're okay.
At that point, I knew I better get inside and seek shelter. I was trying to persuade my husband and Bill to come inside, and they wouldn't come.
It's very rough. Here it comes.
Here it goes.
Here it comes. Here it comes. It's right out here. I'm 10 feet from it, and all the electricity, all the power lines are going.
I'm like, Dad, get inside, kind of like, how could you stand out there that long?
Oh, it's coming right at your house. Look at that.
Yeah. It's coming right at the house, and we're gonna have to go in a minute. It's either that or do or die. I kept thinking as I was filming it that if it did come at us, we were just gonna dive out onto the dock.
This is so sweet.
See if I get a little more. It destroyed everything in the water, and that's when we backed up to the cabin area.
I went to the door again, and I begged Bob and Bill to come in, and they wouldn't come.
We were all there probably longer than we should have been, but we were fascinated by the whole thing, and we stayed out there and kept filming.
I felt angry that my husband could be so dumb to get so close to a tornado like that. Couldn't believe he did it. I told him to increase his life insurance.
Just totally incredible. It's right outside. Whoa! Look at this.
My mom was hovering over me, and I was screaming, and I thought we were gonna die.
I'm trying to calm her down, and seeing a big tree just thud a foot or so past our window.
Get away from the windows! Tree just blew over.
I rushed over to the window to look out, and everyone's saying,
Get away from the windows! Get away! Get away!
all of a sudden, boom, a window crashed. I'm like, ah, and then it finally hit me that I'm in, this is dangerous, that I could get killed here.
Get away! Where's everybody? Where's everybody? Where is everybody?
It felt as though all of the air in the cabin were being sucked out. The worst part of it was hearing things breaking, hearing the wind be so strong and you don't know what's going on with the rest of your house. All you know about is what's going on in that little room.
Are you guys okay? The windows are totally blown out.
When I was in the bathroom, I just remember trees falling down and hearing big crashes and booms. And I thought the second floor of our cabin had collapsed. I was just really scared.
It looked so powerful, almost as though it were alive.
We didn't know what was going to happen. I thought I could be filming my own death, too. You don't know what Mother Nature's going to do.
Where is everybody?
I knew the tornado was over when the wind started dying down. You could see the sun more, you could see a rainbow. I was relieved that nobody got hurt.
It was just basically the worst day of my life. We walked outside and we saw all the destruction and the damage, and it was just really sad. I cried.
It's just devastating through the whole house. Smashed the roofs.
I didn't cry until I walked around the house and saw all the trees down. We lost every 100-year-old tree we had. And you can't replace those, and you don't appreciate them until they're gone.
The whole lake was full of debris, life jackets. Every boat on the whole west shoreline where our house is here is turned upside down. It was just real scary. This videotape will be in the family forever. We'll show it to the grandkids, friends.
I can hardly even watch the video without feeling my heart race, getting a sick feeling in my stomach. It's not a pleasure to watch it.
Where's everybody? Where is everybody?
It's important to remind our viewers here that safety should be the #1 concern in any situation like this one. A few seconds of videotape is not something for which you should risk your life, nor the lives of your loved ones. The stories in tonight's special. Minneapolis, Minnesota. The NBC affiliate here, KARE-TV, uses a helicopter in its news coverage. On this day, pilot Max Messmer and cameraman Tom Empey are assigned to cover a parade. Now, here's how an ordinary story becomes extraordinary.
Okay, go for it, right now, it's on the ground.
To my amazement, on the left side of the aircraft, I saw this dark, very peculiarly shaped funnel cloud building. It was surrealistic. It was just completely different from anything I have ever seen or anything I've ever thought a tornado would be like. It was like something out of a Walt Disney movie. It was something like out of Fantasia.
This is really spectacular.
It was definitely a sight that you go, wow. And the first thing that goes through my mind is get a picture of it.
We have another touchdown here.
As we approached this thing, that's when the things ran through my mind about whether or not this was a safe thing to do. I guess in my wildest imagination, I never thought that what we were about to do was fly within a quarter mile of this thing. In retrospect, I would have said, get me out of here.
This is spectacular. This is spectacular. We have debris thousands of feet in the air. There are flash fires on all the high tension wires. Yes, I hear you. Do you read me, Paul?
As they were shooting the live video, I was down here updating people, showing radar, showing where the storm was, and reminding people what to do. There's no question that Max was taking some amount of risk to be that close to the twister.
The lightning was the only thing that really frightened me, because a couple of times it popped, and
There was no time between the flash of light and the thunder that you heard, so we knew it was close.
I think it was a danger of us being too captivated by what we saw and forgetting what we were supposed to do.
I am I'm about a half a mile from the touchdown area right now, and the winds are very gusty. There's heavy rain and lightning in the area.
When I zoomed in, it was just looked like as tight as the end of a pencil, and it was ripping around this group of trees and slowly popping them out of the ground one at a time. It was just making toothpicks out of these trees.
It's ripping entire pine trees into the air, thousands of feet. I don't know if it has damaged any houses. I won't be able to find out until later on.
I was terrified that a tree limb or some debris from the tornado would fall through the rotor blades. And that could literally have sheared off the rotor blades. And at that point, as Max so adequately describes it, the helicopter has all the aerodynamics of a grand piano.
Really spectacular.
There were a few small items that I heard hit the rotor. It doesn't take very much before it gets your attention.
I'm going to have to leave this area here. The debris is drifting my way.
We actually circled the tornado, got a view of it from all different angles, and it changed constantly, and it was just the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen.
Being able to witness a tornado live in progress at 5 o'clock, it was almost like a dream, like a bad dream. I can remember a couple of times pinching myself to make sure that this wasn't all some sort of nightmare. I mean, the video was hypnotizing. It's almost as if the tornado wanted to be photographed.
And it looks like right now we have another touchdown here.
And then suddenly, just as fast as it started, it seemed to dissipate.
We kind of laughed at each other and went, wow, that was something.
It was a little bit scary to think about what we just did, but it was a good feeling.
Every once in a while, I still pull that video off the shelf just to take a look. No one has ever flown that close and got a bird's eye view of a tornado like we did that day. That was a once-in-a-lifetime shot, and it still makes me go, wow.
As we've just seen, extraordinary moments of video are often captured quite unexpectedly. And we've also seen that a camcorder...
This is the time of the year when your thoughts turn towards severe weather. Every year, people are killed and property is destroyed by one of nature's most destructive forces. In tonight's edition of Violent Skies, we take a closer look at tornadoes.
Tornadoes are the most violent of all the storms on Earth. They produce winds that can exceed 300 miles an hour. Tornadoes occur in many regions around the world, but in total number of storms, the U.S. leads the way. 1,167 were reported across the country in 1993. The largest percentage occur in the infamous area known as Tornado Alley, a region in the Plains states. Texas, on average, reports 123 tornadoes a year. Oklahoma, 53, and Kansas, 42. Storms concentrate in this area because of a unique combination of weather conditions and topography. Typically, in spring, a low-pressure system pulls out into the plains. This is accompanied by a warm front, cold front, and sometimes the boundary between moist and dry air, known as the dry line. Brisk winds in the lower atmosphere, the low-level jet, blow up from the Gulf of Mexico, supplying energy and moisture. The jet stream in the upper atmosphere races overhead at speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. This brings in energy and dry air aloft. Finally, cold air aloft pushes east, and the atmosphere becomes unstable. Add all these ingredients together, and the environment is primed for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. Tornadoes evolve because of certain elements. Wind shear, winds at different altitudes blowing in different directions, causes the air between the layers to begin spinning, almost like a horizontal tornado, although not nearly as fast. When this horizontally rotating air meets an updraft, the rotating tube can become stretched and tilted. As the now nearly vertical tube tightens its spin, it speeds up. The result, a tornado that has the potential of causing loss of life and extensive property damage. In Andover, Kansas, portions of the town were flattened by a twister in April 1991. 13 people were killed, another grim reminder of the power of one of nature's most deadly forces. I'm Charlie Welsh, the Weather Channel.
As we have just seen, tornadoes can cause death and great destruction. The amount of destruction usually depends on the strength of the tornado. Just as hurricanes are categorized by force, so are tornadoes by something called the Fujita scale. If a tornado is classified as an F0 or an F1, it is considered weak, but it can still do damage. Minor roof, tree, and sign damage with F0s, but winds all the way up to 112 miles per hour with an F1, which can tear some mobile homes completely apart. Now, as we head up the scale, an F2 or an F3 tornado is considered strong. And again, with winds up to 206 miles per hour with an F3, strongly built buildings and the outside walls can be completely blown away. So we're starting to get even more violent. And then you head up to F4 and F5. These are classified as violent tornadoes. Again, 261 to 318 miles per hour for an F5. Strongly built houses completely blown away. The destruction just unbelievable. Fortunately, the most rare tornadoes are the F4s and the F5s. Severe thunderstorms also have a criteria to be considered severe. A storm must possess winds exceeding 58 miles per hour, have hail 3/4 of an inch or larger, and usually or possibly have funnel clouds or tornadoes. In all severe storms, you want to be safe, especially during tornadoes. So go to an interior room on the lowest floor, but if you're in a mobile home, try to get to a more secure shelter if you can. And if you're outside or in a vehicle, take shelter in a ditch or behind underpass pilings. In tomorrow night's segment of Violent Skies, we take a trip to Kansas City to see what steps are being taken in the role of forecasting tornadoes. Now, we really don't have any severe weather.
Noticed that dramatic atmospheric pressure changes in Darwin, Australia, and in Tahiti seem to coincide with changes in rainfall patterns in India. He named this phenomenon the Southern Oscillation, but he was not aware of the Peruvian El Nino or the vital role of the ocean in this atmospheric seesaw. His work was dismissed by the scientific community and forgotten until the late 1950s. Then meteorologist Jacob Bjerknes began studying Pacific Ocean temperatures as part of an international team. By chance, he observed the 1957-58 El Nino. He concluded that ocean and atmosphere interact intimately, coupling to form one great climate engine, and that El Nino is just one element in a huge climate event, an event that includes the Southern Oscillation. In the scientific world, it became known as ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. To the public, it is El Nino. Its dimensions are enormous. At its largest, the El Nino warming covers a strip of ocean at the equator that is 1/4 of the circumference of the world. It affects weather from Florida to Peru to India. So to understand the El Nino, you'll need to understand how the world's weather works under normal conditions. Near the equator, oceans are warm. The water warms the air above it, and that makes the air rise. Rising air allows surface air to stream in from the north. The air then cools and sinks about 30 degrees north, creates an area of high pressure and sets up a full circle. This circulation is known as the Hadley cell. In the southern hemisphere, there's a mirror image of the northern hemisphere's circulation. There's a lot of moisture rising in the warm air near the equator. And of course, rising moist air cools and causes low pressure, instability, clouds, and rain. When you look at this pattern from a bird's eye view, you see two very important elements in our story. First, the clouds and rain formed by the merging rising air between the Hadley cells near the equator form a band of rain across the tropics known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone. Second, because of the rotation of the Earth, the southward surface winds of the Hadley cells move around the high-pressure areas centered near 30 degrees, enter the reflected in a curve to the west. Those are the trade winds. The trade winds interact with the ocean's surface, pushing the warm surface waters from the east near South America to the west, toward Tahiti in Australia. That allows the cold water from the ocean's bottom to surface off the coast of Peru, and that's known as upwelling. Here's what it looks like in 3 dimensions. The warm water is very shallow off Peru, very deep off Australia. The trade winds are blowing toward the west of the ocean's surface. And the extensive clouds, rain, and storms form over that very warm western Pacific area. Those are the conditions across the tropical Pacific during non-El Nino years. We'll show you how an El Nino develops and look at its effects on the Gulf Coast of the United States in Part 2. The storms began in Texas in December of 1991, just a little before Christmas. Tornadoes, hail, high winds, and rain.
Stand by, Scott. Stand by a second. I'm shooting. I got hail. Hold on.
Day after day, week after week, till March of 1992.
We tried to catch him on the other side of I-10.
Yeah, where he went under the bridge there.
Right, he was just going way too fast.
Flash floods turned roads and streets into raging killer rivers. You can almost count on El Nino to hit Texas hard. It takes a lot of heat, energy, and moisture to create storms of this magnitude, and it's all generated from the heat of the El Nino and the tropical Pacific. And El Nino gets its start in the South Pacific about a year before North America feels its effects. It's Christmas time in the first year of an El Nino. Along the coast of Peru, cold waters become a little warmer. The high-pressure centers in the central and southeastern Pacific weaken. And the air flowing away from the highs, the trade winds, weaken as well. Not a full El Nino yet. Not even a sure sign. It just means that something's up. But if the trade winds stay weak into March and April, there'll be less cold water upwelling off the coast of Peru. Sea surface temperatures there rise dramatically. And that unusual warming of the waters continues across the eastern Pacific. The red area you see here represents temperatures relative to normal. The rain and clouds that are normally heavy in the far western Pacific drift toward the central and eastern Pacific, drawn to the warming waters there. That means an extraordinary amount of rain in the eastern Pacific. Because of all the rising air, the convection in these stormy areas, the north-south Hadley circulation is strengthened. And that's how you get from the South American coast to the North American coast, caught up in the strength of the Hadley cell. By December of the second year, the warmth and the moisture from the El Nino merges with storms in the northern hemisphere, intensifies the subtropical jet stream, and pulls heavy rains all the way to the Gulf Coast of the U.S.
Here we have the sea surface temperature anomaly chart for the month of May.
Vern Kowski of the Climate Analysis Center keeps track of El Ninos for the National Weather Service.
There are 2 regions of the U.S. that are affected in a consistent manner. One is the area of the Gulf Coast states from West Texas on through into the southeast. That region normally is wetter than normal and slightly cooler than normal during an El Nino winter. That would be running from November through March. The other region which has a consistent signal is the area of the northern plains and the border states running from Washington through Minnesota and on up into western Canada. That entire region is warmer than normal during an El Nino winter.
That other region is affected by the northern branch of the jet stream. Normally, the jet stream leads storms and cold into the Pacific Northwest all winter. But the El Nino pushes that northern branch northward into the Yukon. The Pacific Northwest depends on mountain snows to melt slowly throughout the spring and summer to keep reservoirs there full during the dry seasons. Without a cold winter, there's no snow to melt. In Seattle, Washington, that means drought, mandatory water restrictions in a city known for its wet climate.
I'm looking for water running down the street or wet sidewalks, something like that. It's starting to get browner here, and this is a lot of what we're seeing now over the last couple of weeks. More brown rather than green. A couple of weeks ago it was more green than brown.
The drought is severe, and we've been aware of it in Seattle since about the 1st of April when we started putting our first alerts out and seeing that it was going to really be serious for the summer. We didn't have any snow this year, so our problem is not a lack of rainfall so much as lack of snowfall, which would melt off until about mid-June. Typically, there's still snow up there melting off, replenishing the reservoirs. This year we got almost none. At a time, 1st of April, when we should have had 80 inches or so of snowpack, 6 feet or more, up in the mountains, we had about 14 inches. So for all intents and purposes, almost none. That's why we put the water restrictions in mid-May.
Boat traffic along the Seattle waterways slowed to a crawl during the water restrictions. Each time the Ballard locks were operated, tons of water spilled out of the city's reservoirs. So boat operators had to wait for a full house before they could move on. The traffic jams caused some anxious moments. Salmon were endangered too. Without enough water released into streams and rivers, salmon can't make their normal spawning run. That threatened future salmon harvests. Was 92 the first time Seattle had a need for water police?
I did it in '87. We had a very dry winter in '87.
There was an El Nino in 1987.
We had a real warm winter in '82.
And in 1982. The 1992 drought was one of the worst on record in the Pacific Northwest. Forest fires were the inevitable result. During the first 2 weeks of August, 25 separate fires raged in the region. Seattle sat in the middle of tindered dry fuel just waiting to be ignited. The conditions and topography nearly identical to those in Oakland, California in October of '91.
Man, we need air support real bad up here. Have they got anybody coming? Good. We need Marlboro evacuated and all the houses in the way. I don't think we're going to stop this thing. Yeah.
Chief Manuel Navarro was in charge of the fire operations that day.
There's really no way to prepare for a fire of that magnitude. It really takes a life of its own.
Fire is totally out of control on several fronts. We've got at least 100 acres burning, trees, brush, houses.
The weather was a substantial factor.
Yeah, we're trapped between the lines of fire here. We got no water.
Within the first hour, 790 homes were burnt.
Haven, we have a woman on the phone. Her house is going up. She's an invalid.
Now, if you do just a little bit of math, in the city of Oakland, there are 23 fire engines. And so if you divide 790 by 23, it doesn't come out very well.
Don't put the Hill Area Disaster Plan into effect. We need to get ready for mass evacuations. Affirmative. This fire is spreading in several directions. It's taken everything.
3,000 individual dwellings were destroyed that day in Oakland. 23 people died.
The city of Oakland and Berkeley and the Bay Area itself has a long history of wildland fires. 20 years ago, we had a fire in the Oakland Hills. We lost a number of homes, and it was located in the same spot where the fire started last year. So there's no question that people are aware of it. They may forget, but history seems to just keep repeating itself.
An El Nino often means heavy rains for some or most of the California coast. But the El Nino of '86-'87 left California dry and marked the onset of a 6-year drought. And the El Nino of '91-'92 dumped days of rain on Southern California, but too late and too far south to offer drought relief to Oakland. The Oakland fire was not the direct result of an El Nino. You see, an El Nino does not control weather events like individual rainstorms. It triggers climate change, the tendency or trend toward a certain kind of weather.
If we then look at something else like California, we find that the statistical relation is much weaker. Sometimes things happen one way, sometimes they happen another. What it means is that not that El Nino is not important for what happens there, but that it's definitely not the only game in town.
But when El Nino does hit California, it's with a vengeance. That's part 3. February 1st, the El Nino of 1991-92 had not touched the California coast. The relentless 6-year drought there seemed bound to continue. While Texas cities watched day after day of rains and floods, California was left high and dry. Then for 2 weeks in February, the Los Angeles area was deluged.
I see this type of thing where they show news pictures of floods in Texas and back in the Midwest and the East and so forth. It's just hard to imagine what does happen, and it happens very, very quickly.
Unbelievable how fast that water came up. And before we knew it, there was nowhere to go. All I could think of was hurry up with those choppers. I'm a lousy swimmer, and I don't know how long I can tread water out here.
We did 35 rescues of people that day, 4 dogs, 2 cats, and 2 birds. Our resources were stretched very thin.
It was the only major rain event in Southern California during the 1991-92 El Nino. Mudslides wiped out homes. Floods turned highways into raging rivers. 11 people were killed.
I've never seen it rain so hard in all my life in California.
And then the rain ended, and the climate in Southern California returned to what we think of as normal for the rest of the winter and spring. But the El Nino continued in the South Pacific well into June. What you're seeing here are sea surface temperatures in the Pacific during the 91-92 El Nino, and predictions for those temperatures made 6, 9, and 12 months before the event. Stephen Zebiak is part of the team at Columbia University who designed this computer model. The model told Zebiak there would be an El Nino, but just what it would do to North America, and particularly the California coast, was more difficult to predict.
Perhaps the best way to think of it is it may mean that there's more of a tendency toward a particular pattern than there would be. It doesn't guarantee it, doesn't mean that the opposite can't happen. It just means that other factors aside, this makes a certain signal more likely to occur than it would otherwise.
No one predicted the El Nino of 1982-83, yet it was the most powerful of the century. Dust storms, fires, and drought in Australia, Africa, and Indonesia. Devastating rains and coastal storms in California, the Gulf Coast, and Peru. The global price tag, $40 billion.
There was a meeting of scientists, and at that time, an unofficial prediction was made by a leading scientist that there was no El Nino in sight. And in general, there was not a clue in this audience of people that were the most knowledgeable people in the world on this subject that an event was even going to occur, let alone the largest of the century.
This three-dimensional model shows Pacific Ocean temperatures during that El Nino. At the time, there was no real-time data available from the South Pacific, so science was caught off guard. But after 1982, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric